It's family Sunday. Sorry, the kids are upstairs today. Forgot to mention that in the opening this morning. Apologize for that. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. And it is good to be here this morning. And I say we are ending the spiritual warfare series today, but I have no idea what Pastor Greg's going to preach next week, so he may get a word from God to continue it one more week, maybe not, I don't know, but we'll see what God puts on his heart. It's been a good series. We've covered a lot of ground, and we've looked at aspects of spiritual warfare that I don't think most people really think about or cover or talk about. And I didn't do that because I am predisposed to not following tradition. Although that is true, I am sometimes have a hard time with being traditionalist. And I think it's more of a rebellious spirit issue I got to work out than actually having a problem with tradition. Sometimes there are a problem with tradition, but some traditions are good. And some traditions are important to maintain. But I really felt the sense in the series to really dig into weapons that are extremely powerful that we don't really grasp or understand or see or realize. And so that's kind of why we've been talking through this series about, number one was the issue of sound, the power of the weapon of sound, and how you get that sound from the kingdom that develops in you, and that starts to reverberate into the kingdom of darkness. And on a spiritual level, it's that shock wave. It's when that atomic bomb explodes and that shock wave comes out and that shock wave hits the houses and just incinerates them. That's all sound. That is all that is sound. It is such a powerful force that when it's compressed into a tight area and then released, it becomes an extremely destructive force. And then we've talked about the weapon of language and how kingdom language becomes a weapon, and that when you combine kingdom language with the sound of the kingdom, now you have this shockwave combined with these words that were breathed into, these words that actually have life and power because they were originally spoken by God himself. And we looked at the example of Jesus standing up after he gets up from this prayer in the garden, and the soldiers are around him, and they ask him, "Are you Jesus?" And he says, "I am," and it just knocks them all flat on the ground. And we've looked at the issue of worship, with sound and language being combined in worship, and what worship really is, and how you can't effectively worship. You can't actually call it worship if there's no sacrifice. Because worship and sacrifice are tied together. We went back to the original mention of the word, the first mention of the word worship in the Bible. And the first mention of the word worship was Abraham when he goes to the mountain to offer Isaac up as a sacrifice. And he tells his servants, he says, "You guys wait here, me and the boy are going up to worship God." But he knew in his mind that he was going up to sacrifice God. He didn't lie in that moment. Because sacrifice is worship. And true worship requires sacrifice. And so as we come here, the reason our worship is growing is because we've been walking through these seasons of sacrifice. And it's been impacting our hearts, and it's been impacting our lives, and it's been impacting everything around us. And yet in the middle of it, somewhere, somehow, we remnant of believers have decided to continue to press into God in the midst of the hardship, and in doing so, we are sacrificing and we are truly worshiping God. Because we are determining within ourselves that it doesn't matter the hardships, it doesn't matter what's going on around us. Yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's bad. Yes, it's painful. But there's something about God that's we're not going to let go of. And we come to the place, I think, for many of us where maybe we've just lifted our heads to God in the midst of all the pain and in the midst of all the struggle and in the midst of all the hardship. And we've kind of been like the disciples when Jesus said that unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you have no part of me. And all of the people that were following him left. And then he looks and there's still 12. And he says, are you going to leave me too? And they said, where are we going to go? And there's a place where I think a lot of us have come to that position, that in the midst of the hardship, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the suffering in our lives, we finally come to the place where we just look up to God and we say, God, we don't understand why there's no relief. We don't understand why it just seems like day after day after day, the pounding. But at the end of the day, all I can do is look up and say, where else am I going to go, God? You are still my God. And I still trust you. And that is a sacrificial moment. We talked about the moment where you cross the threshold. You cross the threshold where you make a determination through the pain, through the suffering, that I'm not going to quit. And you cross that threshold, and once you cross that threshold, there is nothing that this world or that darkness can throw at you to cause you to quit. Because you have crossed the threshold of quitting. And you've determined in your heart and in your mind, I am not going to quit. Whether you take my life, or whether the rest of my life is day of suffering after day of suffering after day of suffering, I am not going to quit. I refuse. These are weapons of our warfare. This is spiritual warfare. This is what spiritual warfare really looks like. It's the nitty-gritty of it all. It's being out there on the front lines, the soldier on the front lines. It's not the cockpit view from a distance that you don't get personally involved. This is close quarters combat. And we find ourselves in this day after day after day in the trenches, slugging it out. And the capstone on this, the only thing that I could think of as a capstone to put on this, is the issue of intercession. And what is true intercession? I've called this message, Intercession, the spiritual sniper. Snipers have always captured my attention. Ever since I was a little kid, when I was a teenager in high school, my parents put it to me really simply. They said you have two choices when you graduate high school. You either go to college or you go into the military. And we can't afford college. So if you want to go to college, it's still a choice, but you're going to have to pay for it yourself. So military was a good option, right? So a teenager thinks. But I had my heart and mind set on the fact that I was going to become a Navy SEAL sniper. In my mind, there was no higher position in the military. No better thing to be. If you're going to go into the military, you might as well become the best of the best. You might as well become the strongest. You might as well become the most valuable. You might as well become the most dangerous person in the military force ever. And that person, to me, was a Navy SEAL sniper. There was no better as far as I was concerned. And so I had determined in my heart that I was checking into the military. I took the ASVAB test when I was in high school. I scored the second highest in my entire high school. I was ready to go into the military. God had other ideas for me. But it still didn't take away my desire and my affinity for that position of sniper. It was just something that always stuck with me. There was just something about a sniper that I just could not ever let go of. I mean, these guys, man, they sneak into places behind enemy lines unseen, get themselves in a vantage point, and they'll sit there for days waiting for that perfect moment to take the shot. And that one shot could completely change the entire battle. It completely changed the entire war. Just one shot. There's two people that I want to introduce you to today. The first one is a boy, really. We have his picture. There it is. Innocent looking child, right? Doesn't seem like he's much of a threat to anybody. In this picture, he's extremely young. His name is Simo Hoya. And Simo Hoya went into the military at a young age. He joined the Finnish military at age 17. And prior to age 17, he had somewhat of the same affinity that I had when I was a teenager. And he really enjoyed shooting guns. And as a child, he was in marksmanship competitions. And by the time he got into the military, his house was full of trophies from shooting competitions. And the military didn't know that when they brought him in, because he was not somebody who bragged on himself. He's always known as an extremely humble man who didn't like the fame, who didn't really like the attention, but he was really good at what he did. And when he first got into the military, not knowing what he was really capable of, put him into a series of positions that had nothing to do with his true giftings and abilities. And he was actually a bicycle carrier for quite a while, carrying packages on a bicycle in the military from place to place. And finally one day, things opened up, and at the age of 19, he was able to enter into sniper training. And at 19 years old, when he went into sniper training, his trainer would mark down and say of Simo that he had the ability to shoot a target at 500 yards with no scope, open sights, at 500 yards, and hit the target 16 times in 1 minute. Oh, by the way, this was World War II. The gun that he used was similar to the American M1 carbine. It had a 5-round clip, and that's all that he had. What that means is that not only was he extremely accurate in his shot, but that he was extremely fast to change the clip out 4 times and hit the target 16 times in 1 minute. That's crazy. That's fast. They said of him that he had the ability to range distances with his naked eye that were precise up to inches. He was gifted, to say the least. But at the age of 19, after his training, Finland would find themselves locked up in the middle of this war, and they would enter this season that they would end up calling the Winter War. And the Winter War for Finland was, and I think I said World War II, might have been World War I, 39 to 40? World War I? Yeah. So 39 to 40, 1939 to 1940. And the Winter War lasted from November 30th of 1939 to March 13th of 1940. That's 3.5 months. And in 3.5 months' time, this boy would become a man that would look like that. And in 3.5 months' time, this man would be known by the nickname of the White Death. They called him that, not because of the color of his skin, but because he wore white fatigues, and it was in the middle of winter, and he would blend in with the snow, and nobody could see him. In 3.5 months, Simo would kill 542 soldiers. The most ever of any sniper. He would get up around midnight and he would hike into the area where he was going to post up for his missions and get to that position before dawn, before first light. He would hike into those places on his own. And this was Finland in the middle of winter. The temperatures would range anywhere from 4 below zero to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And he would hike into these locations and he would regulate his breathing so that the steam from his breath wouldn't give him away. And he would sit there and he would rehearse his mission. And he would think about what he had to do. He would think about the people, his targets. He would get positioned. He would get set up. And as dawn hit, as first light would come, he could see his targets. And he'd start taking them out. On average, Simo would take out 5 people a day. Some days more, in order to reach that number. 100 days, a little over 100 days, he would kill over 500 people. There's another individual that I would like to introduce you to. She seems harmless. Just a little girl, really, right? This little girl, and I have to read off her name, Ludmila Pavlichenko. And Ludmila Pavlichenko was 24 years old in this picture. And at the age of 24, she wanted to get involved in the war. She wanted to fight for her country. She was on the opposing side. She bugged and bugged and bugged the recruiters to let her join. And finally, they let her in. And they assigned her straight to sniper training. Sniper squad. The Soviet Army, she was part of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Army had 2,000 female snipers. Wow. And out of those 2,000 female snipers, 500 of them would live. She went in to become a sniper, but because the Soviet Army, because Stalin had decided to purge his government and do away with all of the people who had wisdom, his military started falling apart, and he ended up running into a lot of shortages. He had a lot of weapon shortages for the military. And so her first weapon was not a rifle. Her first weapon was a single fragmentation grenade. Here's your grenade. Go win the war. You're a sniper now. I don't know about you, but the grenade just seems a little off from what it means to be a sniper, you know? It's like, we're not going to put a lot of stock into your training, we're not going to put a lot of stock into your weapons, we'll just give you a grenade and just toss it, and you'll probably take out 3 or 4 people, you'll be good, right? She got into her first battle at the age of 25. And at the age of 25, one of her comrades in war had fallen because he had gotten shot and was injured, and he gave her his gun, which was a bolt-action rifle. She, after receiving that gun, shot 2 enemy soldiers, and in her own words, she said that that moment was a baptism in fire for her, and that she knew from that moment on she was a true sniper. This little girl would turn into this lady. Still seemingly sweet. She would fight for about a 9-month stretch of time. And in 9 months, that little girl would take out 307 enemy soldiers. And with that 307 enemy soldiers, 36 of those were other snipers. She holds the record still for most confirmed kills of any female sniper ever. And in fact, outside of Simo, there's only one other guy who has trumped her kills in the history of recorded sniper history. So what does this have to do with anything? The word for intercession in the Bible is pagah. I think I have a slide for that one. Yeah. It means to hit the mark, to fall upon suddenly, strike down, intercession. I think sometimes our view of intercession is confused. I shared on Facebook yesterday that after researching this word pagah, I'm fairly convinced that the majority of intercession that goes on is nothing more than putting a gumball in a slingshot. Because the majority of the use of this word in the Old Testament is used in the context of extreme violence. It is a violent moment of striking down somebody. It is the violent moment of falling upon somebody or some army or some object for the purpose of elimination. It is the moment when that meets with force to take out the target. That is the context for 90%, I would say, of the use of this word, pagah. It is not this fluffy idea of prayer that we've come to believe in. It is the moment when wars get changed. It is the moment when something happens that completely dismantles the enemy's ability. See, the thing about the sniper that really just blows my mind is that they can sit there for days in a single position, not moving. Their eyes are looking through the scope at a target that is a long ways away, and they're constantly in their mind, they're constantly, for days, they're constantly figuring weather, they're constantly figuring wind, they're constantly figuring elevation, they're constantly figuring. They have to be ready because at any moment, their perfect opportunity could arise for their one shot, and they only get the one shot. And they better hit the mark. And until that opportunity arises, they position themselves strategically to be able to make that shot and to hit their target. They don't allow other distractions to deter them. They don't allow other things to get them off focus, to make them off kilter. If we went back to the picture of the gentleman, Simo, his face looks like that because he got hit in the jaw with an explosive round from a bullet from another soldier. But he still made the shot. And he still took out his target. If you throw the picture back up of the lady, this was the last picture of her before her death. She was 58 years old when she died, and she died of a stroke. Part of the reason that she died of a stroke is because while she was in duty and she was positioned to take out a target, they somehow located her position or figured out kind of where she was, and they started launching mortar shells at her. And she stayed in position and took out her target, but not before getting shrapnel from a mortar shell in her face. That took her out of the war. She spent a month in the hospital recovering from that. You see, it didn't matter the distractions. They didn't lose focus of their target. It didn't matter the threat to their own personal life. They were not moving from their target. When Simo was asked, how did you kill so many people? How did you make so many accurate shots? He said, I just did what I was ordered to do, and I did it to the best of my ability. He said, and Finland would not be a nation today if everybody else hadn't done the same. Intercession isn't about just bringing a complaint before God. That's not what it's about. See, intercession is supposed to be the sniper hitting the target. Intercession is that the soldiers of the army of God have been given orders, and they're doing what they've been told to do, and they do it to the best of their ability. And they don't care about the outside circumstances. They don't care about the distractions that are trying to get them off target. They don't care about the threat to their own personal life. They're going to pull the trigger, and they're going to see that target fall in their scope before it's all said and done. And even if the enemy takes them out, they will make the shot. That's intercession. There's a story in the Bible that talks about this. 2 Kings, I think it's 1 Kings. Is it 1 Kings? Yeah, 1 Kings, sorry. Chapter 2, verse 19 through 46. And I know it's up on the board, but it's up here in the ESV version, and I'm going to read it out of the King James Version, just so you can see the difference here in some of the words. The word pagah is used in this one story more than it's used in any other place in the Bible. And so I'm going to show you, and you'll be able to see where this word pagah is brought in, and you'll be able to get a better understanding of how it's being used and what its true intent really is. So, starting in verse 19, it says, Bathsheba, who was Bathsheba? Yeah. Uriah's wife, which soon became David's wife, which then became Well, before she was David's wife, she became the mother of David's son, which was Solomon. So at this point in our story, Solomon is now king. David is gone, and Bathsheba is still alive. And so in verse 19, Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her and sat down on his throne and had a throne set for the king's mother. So she sat at his right hand. Then she said, I desire one small petition of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah your brother as wife. And King Solomon answered and said to his mother, now why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he's my older brother. For him and for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah. Now, sometimes you have to be able to read the sarcasm into what's being said here. See, what Solomon is really saying to Bathsheba is like, why stop there? And you're asking for a wife, why don't you just ask for the whole kingdom? He's my older brother, right? Maybe he should be king. Why don't you ask for his little cohorts, the people that were with him? See, if we trace this story back, these individuals that are being listed here are individuals who were antagonistic against David, his father. And they didn't so much like David, and they were actually on the side of Absalom. You know what happened there, right? And so these individuals still remain in Solomon's kingdom. Now Solomon is brought in as king, right? But don't be deceived, because just because he has the title of king doesn't mean that his kingdom is secure. We can trace it back in the Bible, and we can see the moment when God spoke to David, and God told David that I will give your son, your future kingdom will be a kingdom of peace, but you will war. All right? David would not see peace in his day, but God had given him a word that it would be peace in the day of his son Solomon, when his son Solomon would be king. So we go through David's life, and we get to the end of David's life. Solomon's lifted up as king, but we still got troublemakers in the camp. Solomon has asked God for wisdom. God, just give me wisdom. God came to Solomon, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. Wow, what a thing, huh? And Solomon, already being wise beyond his years, said, God, just give me wisdom. And God was very pleased with his answer. And so God started showering upon this young man great wisdom, and such great wisdom and discernment that when his own mother came to him, probably in the back of her mind, kind of conniving a way for her other son to become king, for Solomon's older brother to take the throne, Solomon caught on to it. He knew what was going on. So he calls her out on the carpet. Oh yeah, sure. Ask for a wife for him. Why don't you ask for the whole kingdom? Why don't you just give him all of that? Matter of fact, why don't you give it to him? And why don't you give it to the others who are in league against my father? Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, may God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. This is his moment of discernment. If this ain't a lie, if this ain't Adonijah trying to weasel his way into a position that is not for him, that God didn't give him, but that God gave me, then may the same thing happen to me that needs to happen to him. That's pretty intense. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of the house of David my father, and who has established a house for me, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and struck him down, and he died. Struck him down, Pagah. So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada. And when Benaiah got to Adonijah, he committed Pagah. Took him out. And to Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go to Anathoth, to your own fields, for you are deserving of death. But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, and because you were afflicted every time my father was afflicted." Abiathar would later turn against David. He would join ranks with Absalom. But he would live through that ordeal and come back into a place where he had position even under King Solomon. And King Solomon finally came to him and basically told him, go tend to your fields. This is basically your moment of mercy. You're going to die, just not today. Go be with your family. I'm giving you grace. I'm giving you mercy in this moment because you did help my father for a season. And your heart truly was for him. You didn't take a stand when you should have taken a stand, but your heart was for my father. So you have some time to go be with your family before the end of your life. So Solomon removed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which he spoke concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. The news came to Joab, for Joab had defected to Adonijah, though he had not defected to Absalom. So Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon was told, "Joab has fled to the tabernacle of the Lord. There he is by the altar." Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, "Go strike him down." Pagah. Joab. You see Joab, that traitor? How he's run. He aligned with the enemy. It's time for a Pagah. So Benaiah went to the tabernacle of the Lord and said to him, "Thus says the king, come out." And he said, "No, but I will die here." And Benaiah brought back word to the king, saying, "Thus said Joab, and thus he answered me." Then the king said to him, "Do as he has said. Strike him down." Pagah. And bury him, that you may take away from me and from the house of my father the innocent blood which Joab shed. So the Lord will return his blood on his head, because he struck down Pagah, 2 men who were righteous and better than he, and killed them with the sword, Abner the son of Ner, and the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, the commander of the army of Judah. Therefore my father David did not know it. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab and upon the head of his descendants forever. But upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forevermore from the Lord. So Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and Pagah and killed him. And he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. The king put Benaiah the son of Jehoiada in his place over the army, and the king put Zadok the priest in place of Abiathar. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house and go to Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there anywhere. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, know for certain you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head." And Shimei said to the king, "This saying is good, and my lord the king has said so. Your servant will do." So Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days. Now it happened at the end of the 3 years that 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, the son of Maacah, king of Gath, and they told Shimei, saying, "Look, your slaves are in Gath." So Shimei arose, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish, to Gath, to seek his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, 'Know for certain that on the day you go out and travel anywhere, you shall surely die'? And you said to me, 'The word I have heard is good'? Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you?" The king said moreover to Shimei, "You know, as your heart acknowledges, all the wickedness that you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever." So the king commanded Benai, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and pagah him, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. Now you have to understand what is taking place here. Solomon was put in as king. He was anointed as king, and he was given that position. But just because he was in that position doesn't mean that his kingdom was going to be established. You see, Solomon's reign was meant to be a reign of peace. But before there could be a reign of peace, his kingdom needed to be established. But before his kingdom, in order for his kingdom to be established, Solomon needed an intercession. See, because there was enemies within the house. There were people within the house. There was darkness in the house that could have derailed Solomon from the kingdom that God had promised him, that could have derailed his intended purpose as king over Israel, as king over Jerusalem. It could have completely thwarted the work that Solomon was set there to do. And if Solomon was truly going to accomplish all that God had for him to accomplish, to get from the position of his calling into the functionality of the call, he had to have serious intercession. Something had to intercede. Because if something didn't intercede in this process, Solomon could have lost the kingdom. You understand that? This is serious. This is a big deal. He didn't have to go to war with the nation. He had to go to war within his own house. He had to clean his own house. There were traitors in the house. There were people who did his father wrong. There were people who were traitors against his father that were still alive, that could still make some serious problems for Solomon. And the only way his kingdom could be established was for something to intercede and get rid of the darkness. And so Solomon, in his wisdom, took out the threat. He understood where the threat was. He knew who the threat was. And he took them out. And the word that is used to describe the moment when Benaiah took out the threat is pagah. The same word translated as intercession. This is a violent moment. Struck him down is the G-rated version of what happened. This was a moment when extreme hostility met an opposing force. And in that moment, it was merciless to accomplish what needed to happen. The thing about the sniper is that you could look at those pictures and you could say, oh, they just seem like nice people, like they would never hurt anybody. The smile's on their face. But in the moment of carrying out the order, I promise you, they were merciless. The numbers that have been given stated that in World War II, it took on average over 4,700 rounds being fired to kill one enemy soldier. By the time we get to Vietnam, that number had grown to over 15,000 rounds fired to kill one enemy soldier. That's how the math worked out. But then you have a sniper, and how the math works out for a sniper, 1.3 rounds to kill one enemy soldier. They hit their mark. They don't miss. And it doesn't matter if they lose their life in the mission. They're going to complete the mission. It doesn't matter if they don't make it back across enemy lines. It doesn't matter if they walk in and get bombed and get beat up and get captured and get tortured. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is completing the orders, completing the mission. The only thing that matters is taking out your target. You take out your target, and even if you die, it still turns the tide of war. And you understand that taking out the target is more important than your life. And you give your life freely to take out the target. And you do it to the best of your ability. The interesting thing about Simo is that while he was one of the fiercest snipers, the snipers usually don't have a long life. You know that, right? Their life expectancy isn't really that long. He lived to be 96 years old. He died in 2002. You see, intercession is not this candy-coated prayer that we've been thinking. What do we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.? It's not to come here and to just say, God, would you please help me in my life? It is to fulfill orders that we have been given. And we will do it to the best of our ability. And we will sacrifice. It's not convenient to come here. Is it convenient to come here 3 days a week, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.? Is there other things you'd rather be doing sometimes? Is there other pressing issues that really need to be taken care of? That this is really an inconvenience? It's not convenient. We don't do it because it's convenient. We do it because we're under orders, and God has given us marching orders, and He's given us targets and assignments both in this community, in this state, and also in this nation. And we are to carry out those orders to the best of our ability. And it doesn't matter what sacrifice we have to give in order to do it. It doesn't matter if the enemy takes us out in the process. We're going to hit our mark. We're going to strike the target. And it will change the course of war. Even if it means they kill us after we get the shot off. Do you realize how long sometimes it takes for a bullet to hit its target? The world record longest shot was just made a little while ago. I think it was last week. 3 miles. So they had this competition where they were shooting 2.5 miles. And at that time, it was the farthest shot. I mean, these people are trying to get these records. And at 2.5 miles, it took that bullet 10.5 seconds to get to the target. That's a long time for a gun. That's a really long time. That's like an eternity. You realize how long 10.5 seconds is? You know how long a bull rider has to stay on a bull? 8 seconds. A bull rider could ride a bull and get off and win a trophy for an 8-second ride before the bullet got to its target.
Wow.
That's a long time. Do you know there have been times in history where snipers have pulled the trigger and they got killed as soon as they pulled the trigger before the bullet hit their target? They were dead, but the bullet still hit the target. Yeah, you killed me, but guess what's coming? It's already left the barrel. It's on the way. The most important thing to the sniper is not being distracted, not being off focus. Squeezing the trigger and making sure that shot comes out of that gun straight and true. And what happens after that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that we got off the shot and it was true. Because as long as it was true and the trigger was pulled, it will hit its mark. Regardless of whether the person's alive to see it hit or not. So, Jesus at the cross. Jesus' death on the cross was not a shot across the bow of the enemy. You know that. It was not a warning shot. You see, Jesus had lined up the sights. He had the target in his sights. And when he yelled on the cross, "It is finished," that was him squeezing the trigger. And that bullet would be sent out, and he would die. And for 3 days, he would be dead. But 3 days later, that bullet would hit its mark. And it would take out the target. And he would rise victorious. He didn't get distracted by his circumstances that surrounded him. He didn't wane in the face of death. He kept his eyes on the target. And he pulled the trigger. And it hit the mark. And today he calls us. He calls us, would you be snipers in my kingdom? Would you be willing? You see, sniper training is like one of the most grueling trainings ever. I mean, there's times where they just, during the training, they just take you out into the middle of nowhere and drop you off and they leave. And we'll see you in a couple weeks if you're still alive. Here's a knife, maybe. Good luck. Come back in a couple weeks. Did they survive? You've got to be able to resist the urges to succumb to fleshly comfort. You know, praga means to hit the mark. What does sin mean? To miss the mark. Oh. Well, sin is missing the mark. Intercession is hitting the mark. Sin is when I'm trying to accomplish it out of the flesh. And when I'm trying to accomplish it out of the flesh, I'm missing the mark. I can't hit the target. Why? Because I have no fleshly capability to do that, because the weapons of our warfare are not fleshly. They're not carnal, but they're mighty and spiritual to the pulling down of strongholds. I need some spiritual force in order to hit a spiritual target. Intercession is the spiritual force to hit the spiritual target. You will hit the mark if you are interceding. Because you have to get out of your flesh in order to do it. Intercession cannot be done if you're in your flesh. It can't. It's impossible. Oh, I can pray for you. We've heard it, right? EJ spoke this so many times over the years. Oh, you just pray out of your head, and it's like, oh, what am I going to, pray for? Well, I think, okay, Kathy has a toothache, so I'm going to pray for that. And I'm going to, pray that she gets a raise with her job, I think. And, then I'm going to pray that, that maybe she just... her truck doesn't break down this week, and, what are you doing, Rick? Oh, I'm interceding for Kathy. No, you're not. Stop it. No, you're not. There are real spiritual attacks that are happening in her life. There are areas that she needs a moment of pagah. She needs something to come into that moment when the spiritual forces are mounting against her. She needs that moment where something steps in and meets them face to face and strikes them down. Amen. She don't need you praying for a raise for her. She's got good work ethic. She'll get that on her own. Just being honest. We got to have true intercession. It's being strategic. It's having strategic knowledge. Knowledge that is not natural knowledge. You need knowledge from the kingdom of God. Yes. You need God's knowledge into what to pray for Kathy. You may have to sit on top of a ridge in the middle of 40 below weather for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger, to hit the target that is causing or threatening her life. Could you do it? Would you do it? Forces that arise and have risen up against Harvestime Ministries. It might require you to get in position, to be uncomfortable, to remove the distractions, to get yourself out of the enemy that's trying to take you out, because you've been given orders to take out the enemy that's trying to take out Harvestime. And in the middle of that, you've got other enemy that's hunting you, that's trying to get you down, that's trying to take you out. You have to lay there without allowing your circumstances, your personal life, your personal danger, immediate danger, to cause you to lose focus of the mission at hand. Could you do it? Is it worth more than your own life? This is intercession. At its deepest core, this is intercession. We say we pray over our nation. Do we really? No, do we really? your nation is more important than your own personal circumstances? Is your church more important than your own personal circumstances? Is your family member who is headed straight for hell, are they more important than your personal circumstances?
Yes.
Could you lie and sacrifice for days, maybe weeks, waiting for that perfect moment to take the perfect shot to hit the target? Could you do it? Would you do it? Spiritual warfare is not something that we just can quote a couple of verses and say we wage spiritual warfare. Look at me, the mighty warrior. No, you're not. Get back in boot camp because you haven't learned a thing. When you're ready to get serious, then you can join the battle. When you realize that this thing is bigger than you, and that it's worth whatever it costs. Now you're ready to fight the war. I'll close with a quote. A Roman commander named Vegetus said once, if you're wanting peace, prepare for war. Solomon was going to reign in peace, but only because his father battled his entire life. That's it. David would never know peace, but he would leave peace as an inheritance for his son. We could do the same. So Lord, we just thank you for your word. Lord, I pray that today we would really think about what you have really called us to. Lord, you have created weapons for our spiritual warfare that are so mighty. But Lord, they're not to be taken lightly. Weapons that, when properly used, wield a destructive force to completely unseat and dismantle the kingdom of darkness. Lord, I pray that as we move into 2022, that our hearts would be established, that our minds would be focused, and Lord, that we would be ready to move and advance. And Lord, that we would have a determination in our hearts that we are going to do what you have ordered us to do, and we're going to do it to the best of our ability. I thank you, Lord, for each and every soldier in Harvestime Ministries. I pray, Lord, that this be a word of encouragement, that we have a mighty, mighty array of weapons that you have provided us. You have called us into the battles, into the plans and purposes of advancing your kingdom. May we rise in this moment as warriors for the cross of Christ. Pray a blessing over each one here, Lord. We just pray this in Jesus' name.